Hey there, and welcome to another episode of The Bible. Wait, what? Yes, this is the podcast that unravels the mysteries of the Bible's most perplexing, puzzling, and thought-provoking passages. My name is Rohan, and each session I'm joined by a member of our team at C3 Church, Camden, Picton, and Thirroul as they quiz me on some of the more complicated, confusing, challenging, and even confronting passages that we read in our weekly Bible reading plan. We understand that reading the Bible can be a challenging and perplexing experience. Many people just don't know where to start, they get confused, and so they give up. Well, that's why this podcast exists, to equip you with the tools and the knowledge to explore the richness and depth of the Bible for yourself. So grab your Bible, take a deep breath, and join us as we explore this week's passages. To learn more about us or to get in touch with us at C3 Church Camden, Picton and Thirroul, visit any of our three locations' websites. That's c3camden.church, c3picton.church and c3thirroul.church. Or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube just by searching for any of our locations' names. So without any further delay, let's dive into today's conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Rohan and I'm sitting down today with Aaron Waters.
Good morning. How's it going?
Good to have you. It is morning. We are doing a morning recording.
Yeah.
We're actually going to do two recordings. Is that correct? Is that what you're planning today? We
hopefully,
hopefully, if all goes well. It'll depend on how long I speak for.
Yes.
Well, actually, this is our first time with you. You might...
It'll be crazy. Yeah, maybe
You might pull a genie.
Maybe. I mean, I've certainly wrote a lot of notes for these passages. I'm really loving these passages.
Why don't you tell us, you're a member of our church here at Thirroul. Yep. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? We're a fantastic keyboardist. Love having you lead behind us. But tell us a bit about yourself.
Yep. So, I'm a scientist and engineer by trade. Grew up in church. I grew up in C3.
Yep. That's it. That's scientist and engineer. Tell us more about that. What sort of areas of
materials science?
Materials
is
science.
My focus. So stuff that's made of stuff.
Stuff that's made of stuff. Okay, that makes sense.
Which is good.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things that just always been fascinated with how the world works and the wonders of God's creation, I guess you could say.
Yeah, great. And that obviously overlaps with engineering because you need stuff to build stuff.
Yep.
so it's material as in what materials are strong enough, flexibility, all that kind of stuff comes in.
Yep. So it's
like
quite multidisciplinary and lots of maths. I do lots of computing stuff as well. So it's quite technical, but lots of fun. I'm kind of weird that way. I love that stuff.
That's good. Fantastic. Well, we're going to do some challenging passages today, I think. Well, I mean, it's a fascinating book. We're going to be doing rounding out our series on the book of Ecclesiastes, which, incidentally, we're recording this in early April. It's a few months early, and I haven't actually. This is the first of the Ecclesiastes recordings that I've done. So I think I'll be doing the rest of them over the next couple of weeks. Yep. So you're actually, even though we're doing the last 4 chapters, we're actually starting, and then we're moving on to the Gospel of John as well today. Is that correct?
Yes.
John, just one chapter.
Yes, just one chapter, but it's a chapter.
It is a chapter. And I think from memory in our WhatsApp conversation, that's why you chose this, because you have always said you've been fascinated with John 1. Is that right?
Yeah. I absolutely love it. So.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to having a convo around that. So anyway, we'll start with Ecclesiastes chapter 9. So let's go there now.
So, this too I carefully explored. Even though the actions of godly and wise people are in God's hands, no one knows whether God will show them favor. The same destiny ultimately awaits everyone, whether righteous or wicked, good or bad, ceremonial clean or unclean, religious or irreligious. Good people receive the same treatment as sinners, and people who make promises to God are treated like people who don't.
And on that, folks, how encouraged do you feel? It's a strange book.
And the next verse, it seems so wrong that everyone under the sun suffers the same fate. It's just saying all of that. It just seems so wrong to say all that.
To say all that, doesn't it? It just seems so opposite to what we intuitively think the world should be like.
Yeah, what we think the world should be like. And I think as well, like for me, what we're kind of trained to say as Christians.
Good call.
Because we're always trained to say, oh no, because it's God's plan and God's will in God's hands and all that sort of thing. But then we sort of have to face the reality of, in our day-to-day world, we observe that good and bad things happen to everyone.
Yeah. How does it make you feel, like in yourself when you read that, and that knowing that that's in the Bible? That's one of the big challenging things about the book of Ecclesiastes, is because it's quite cynical about life in many ways. The teacher is very cynical about life, and it's there for a reason. I'm just interested in how that makes you feel when you read that.
For me, I think it makes me feel a little bit comforted, because this is what I see day to day. This is what I see in the world, and it's like, no, there isn't something wrong with me. I haven't.
Why is it that it seems like so often those who do their best don't get the reward, and those who seem to not care seem to get the reward? That kind of thing.
And certainly when it comes to my faith, it's the number one question that people ask me, and that I see the world always asking about God, is why is it like this? Because it just doesn't seem to add up. And when I look at the Old Testament, it's full of this idea that, when good things happen, it's God's reward. When bad things happen, it's God's punishment for not following him or turning away from him. Ecclesiastes seems to say, no, it's just random.
Yeah.
Just it's just chance. So how do we do that? I think that's sort of the question that I come to. How do we reconcile that? How do we know where the balance is?
Yeah, and look, I wrestled with Ecclesiastes for many years, and I say it often on this podcast. I owe a lot of my understanding of a lot of scripture now to hearing Tim Mackey from the Bible Project talk about it, and I realized once I heard them teach on the wisdom books. So there's Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and predominantly in their series is Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. And they describe them, and I went, when they describe them that way, you can watch their wisdom books videos, it really helps make sense of it. Proverbs seems to say so much of the opposite of what Ecclesiastes says. So if you open up the book of Proverbs, it's not going to say what you just read. It's going to say, hey, if you live well, if you're generous, you'll reap a reward. That kind of it's almost like Proverbs seems to be saying, if you live righteously, you'll reap a righteous life. Okay, so and the fact is, intuitively, we know that while that might be generally true, it's not always exclusively true, is it?
No.
Like you just said, sometimes bad things happen to good people in the world. So Proverbs is like that. Ecclesiastes comes along and seems to indicate something different. And it's quite cynical at times and quite harsh. And it seems like it's almost counteracting the book of Proverbs. It's almost like the cynic that you get, like if your work friends, it's almost like he's coming along going, you really believe that, do you? That's just stupid, It almost is like that. It can read like that. And the last book, Job, and they go together. And Job's deals with the deep issue of it doesn't address the issue of suffering, but it deals with the issue of suffering. So it doesn't answer the issue of suffering.
Yeah, that's what I sort of felt with Job. It's more of a conversation about it, an exploration of it. Maybe not necessarily
not towing it up and put a bow around it.
No.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a philosophical conversation, whether you think it's a literal story or not. Nonetheless, it's dealing with it. So Ecclesiastes, and the way that the guys in the Bible Project do this, which is really well, is they say Proverbs is like the young, energetic school teacher who's just full of energy and full of life. And hey, you do this, it's going to be great. We're going to have a great day today, and we all need a dose of that. But the reality is, we can't live there because the world doesn't always work according to that principle. So the way to read the Proverbs is they aren't promises, they are general observations of how the world will generally work. If you're generally a kind person, you can't guarantee you'll receive kindness back, it's kind of like a general law that it's more likely that you're going to receive kindness back. That's the kind of principle. Along comes Ecclesiastes, and he's like the old cynic. That's how to describe him. The old chain smoking, cigar smoking cynic who sits in the corner and will make all the wisecracks about life.
That's pretty much the picture I got from it.
You got from it, yeah, exactly. And so he's actually going, that's not really how it is. And so you read it, and it can sound very depressing. But I love the way when I asked you, how does it make you feel? You actually said strangely comforted. I picked up on that. Is the comfort because you can resonate with this a little bit more at times? You can resonate with the fact that life doesn't always work out the way we would think it should? Or?
Yeah. And I think that's my experience. And I think you get the same thing a lot of the time from a lot of the Psalms.
Yes.
That aren't necessarily talking about the best of times. And
No.
all of the dramas that people go through and how they work through that with God. It's a bit more, well, not necessarily more, but it's quite down to earth, quite.
It makes it relevant?
Quite grounded, relevant.
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. And that's how I read Ecclesiastes now. I realise that he goes on a journey. That there's an author who speaks right in the beginning of chapter 1 and right at the end we'll see of chapter 12. Kind of sums it all, intros and sums it up, and in the middle is this teacher. Now, whether that teacher is Solomon or someone else, scholars divided about, but the teacher is the one who is obviously a position of power and authority, whether it's Solomon or not. And this person has gone on this journey of trying to find the meaning of life. And really multiple times throughout the text, and we'll see it here in chapter 9 in a moment too, somewhere, multiple times without the text, he'll say, I think it's 6 times in the text, he'll say something like, oh, well, this sort of thing happens. Bad things happen. So the best thing I can do is recommend that you just eat and drink and enjoy your life.
Eat, drink, and be merry.
Eat, drink, and be merry. Yeah.
Yep.
And that kind of sounds like, well, that's a bit cynical. Where's the faith in that? And it's not supposed to be cynical. What the problem is, I think, it's addressing the issue we all have. And you mentioned it at the start, Aaron, about as being raised as a Christian. It almost sounds like you're taught you don't talk like this. This is a lack of faith.
Yeah.
You're not trusting God, isn't
Absolutely.
it? We've heard all that language
I mean,
before.
no one said that.
No.
But that's
almost
kind
implied.
of, it's kind of what I've learned over the years.
Yes.
I've learned this is how you behave, this is how you talk. And along comes Ecclesiastes and starts breaking all the rules. And I'm like, what? You're not allowed to do that.
You can't speak like that. And intuitively, it's kind of like, on one hand, it sounds like it's depressing to us. But on another hand, if we really evaluate it, all of us, even those that would say they have the most blessed, beautiful, comfortable life, if you're honest, there's been times in your life when there's been injustice, when someone has seemingly got away with something and or you've been seemingly accused of something that you don't believe you've done. There's injustice in the world. It's not perfect. There isn't a bow around it. And this book allows us to do that. So that's how I read it. I read it through that lens of going, he's making observations about the way the world is. And it does sound very depressing. So as we go through these final chapters, I would encourage our listeners to be looking for the message. Because really he's saying, let's put it this way, Ecclesiastes, he's saying, life sucks a lot of the time. That's pretty much what the teacher's saying. Life's pretty sucky at times. However, can you find meaning? Can you find purpose in your sucky life?
Yep.
Rather than thinking when my life is running smoothly, when all the ducks are in a row, when I'm blessed because I've been a good person, when God shines his face upon me, then my life will be happy. He kind of is calling us to go, life has its ups and downs, but you can find meaning in the everyday mundane of life.
Yep. And that I think is something that really stood out for me, even in this chapter when it says, verse 7, go ahead, eat your food with joy and drink your wine with a happy heart, for God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne.
I like it.
And it's, because I think for me in my personal journey, like I've, over the last few years, I've suffered from a lot of anxiety and depression. So I think that's probably part of the reason why this book of the Bible really speaks to me quite a lot. Because I've been through that journey of, having my world seemingly fall apart.
And not being able to reconcile with, what did I do wrong, God? And what was it me? Was it something else? That's a very common thing. Yeah.
And one of the strategies that I've learned that has been so important to me has been to be present and to be in the here and now. Because just the way my crazy mind works, like I'm very thoughtful. My brain will just run for hours on trying to solve some technical problem or trying to figure out the mysteries of the universe and
I'm a bit like you.
The meaning of it all and all of that sort of thing. And I can just, my brain just goes off like that and starts digging down rabbit holes, and it's led to me becoming quite results driven and quite perfectionist about the way I approach things. And so to be able to train myself to just stop and be present in the moment, and to, you know, be aware of the physical world around me, and to and I think what I really take from this part of Ecclesiastes, to be thankful for the absolutely amazing things around me, and for the gifts of God that, you know, just ridiculous. Like I live in such an amazing part of the world. I've got a great family. I've got, you know, a lot of really good friends, wonderful church. And a lot of these things, they're just, you know, you can just take them for granted so easily. But if you stop and see those things, then all of a sudden you're starting to find meaning. And, you know, it's the idea of contentment. You know, it sort of felt like you know, when you're a bit of a perfectionist like me, it can be a bit of a dirty word. It can sort of sound like...
Because there's always more you should be...
Yeah, there's more you should be doing. There's,
I'm very much identify with that too.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily play out in my life in depression. It plays out in my life in stress. So I get stressed by that.
Yep.
But you know, I appreciate your honesty too, because we're probably quite similar in that way, is that it's almost like this lack of contentment with... There's always more to do. There's always more people need me. There's always more than I can be. You know, that pressure to be more, expected to be more. And sometimes that, I don't know about you, sometimes that pressure is real or perceived from others, but sometimes it's just pressure I put on myself.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
To have to achieve some certain standard in order to feel good about myself. And I hear you totally. I mean, your summary there, what you just said in those last few minutes, I'd rewind that and listen to that again, because that was the perfect summary of the message of Ecclesiastes. In a nutshell, the message time and time again. Well, there's a few things that are repeated in Ecclesiastes. One is the word meaningless. It's repeated like 40 times. And by the time you're listening to this, if you've listened to our previous episodes, I will have no doubt mentioned this to the previous guests as well, and I'll touch on what meaningless means in a moment. That theme, 40 times it's mentioned the purpose of meaning. But this concept of what you just read there, eat and drink, enjoy your life, you know, if you're married, be married, enjoy it. If you've got kids, if you haven't got kids, if you've got money, enjoy it. You know, have a splash of cologne if you can wear it. All of that kind of, basically, it's exactly what you said. It's just enjoy your lot in life. There is purpose and meaning in your lot in life. That appears 6 times. So anytime something appears 6 times in 12 chapters, I think there's something there for us.
Yep.
And I think that's the key. Let me see if I can sum it up. I don't think I'll do as good a job as what you did, but in life will have its goods and it will have its bads. It'll have its ups and it'll have its downs. And I think the problem is there's nothing wrong with striving to do well in life. There's nothing wrong with working hard. In the earlier chapters, you'll say, I tried working hard. And all that was meaningless. You know, I tried wine, women, work, the whole lot. He tried and it said it's all meaningless. Nothing in and of itself, you know, pursuing healthy relationships, pursuing work, even pursuing financial gain. None of it's in and of itself is wrong. However, if we make it the benchmark upon which we feel as though we will be happy, or the benchmark upon which we feel like God has approved of us, that's what Ecclesiastes is saying. It's saying if you do that, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because no matter how hard you try, there will be things in life that don't go according to plan. We live in a fallen world. We are fallen human beings. We relate to one another who are fallen human beings. We're a work in progress. The world is groaning, Romans says, waiting for the appearance of the sons of God to come about and put everything right. So we are going to suffer things that don't happen the way we would like them to happen. And the message of Ecclesiastes, as you said, is enjoy that moment. You can't live in the past. This is another way I heard it put. You can't live in the past. We spend most of our time looking back at the good old days, or we spend all our energy in the now, thinking about the future, worrying about the future. And the message of Ecclesiastes is just take that moment. I love the way you said it. Just enjoy that moment that you're in right now.
Yeah.
Go, right now, I'm thankful that I've got friends. I'm thankful that the sun came up today. I'm thankful for the rain. All of that kind of stuff. We can
because it'd be so easy to not be thankful for rain.
Exactly, yeah. Isn't that right? That's a great example, because for years we had drought and we were rejoicing with the rain, and we were straight into absolute rain, and it was like the opposite.
Yeah.
And the message is life's going to have times where there are excesses one way or another. Can you find peace in the moment?
Yep.
Can you find meaning in the moment? And before we move on, this word meaningless,
Yep.
the Hebrew word is hevel. And it actually, meaningless is not a bad translation, but the actual word means smoke.
Okay.
It's actually it means smoke or mist. And if you think about, smoke on a fire, it's real. You're a material scientist, so you'd be able to tell me what smoke is.
Oh, yeah. Carbon compounds.
Carbon compounds and so on, right? It has form, and yet you can't contain its form. You see where I'm going with this?
Yep.
It's like the moment you want to grab it and hold it, it slips through your hands and moves elsewhere. It's like a mist. It's the same concept. And that's interesting that's how the teacher describes life. The moment you try to structure your life, form up your life, define what a good life looks like, it's like grasping at smoke. It just slips through your fingers.
Yep.
Meaningless means that. It's not that it's not meaningful, it's that you can't define it perfectly.
Yeah.
And I love that, because that makes me go, okay, I can sit back and I can just appreciate the flow of the smoke as it leaves a bonfire, and enjoy its beauty for what it is.
Yep.
Not go, oh, it'd look better if we shaped it up into a box. But that's my life. I want to put everything in a box. And God's going, just let it be smoke. It's beautiful if you just let it be smoke.
Yep.
Yeah. So that kind of resonates with me.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely resonates with me, and I've found that even when I am trying to work, and I'm trying to solve some mathematical problem or whatever, sometimes it can feel like that. It can feel like I'm trying to capture the smoke. A lot of that is like, no, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to calculate everything to super precision or anything like that. Just appreciate the idea of what this is, and you can get so much more out of it.
So as a mathematician, as someone who, not a mathematician, but someone who loves maths, do you ever get to the point where you can sit back and you're wrestling with a problem to solve mathematically? Can you take a step back and go, maths is beautiful? Like, or does, yeah. So you see, that's like, maths is like the smoke, and it's nothing wrong with solving a mathematical equation, but the maths in itself is a beauty.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't to me, 'cause
Absolutely.
it doesn't do that to me. But
It's the sort of thing you have to spend years getting used to, and years sort of working with to get to that sort of the beauty side of maths. I think for a lot of us through school and everything, we're used to maths being just, calculate the numbers, do the numbers. But then when you get into the really deep mathematics of, the
way the
mathematical
world works.
structures and how things relate to each other, and all that sort of thing, that's incredibly beautiful. I don't even pretend to understand.
And music, it's
a
maths
little
is
bit
like
of that.
maths is like an art. I mean, musical is mathematical too, but and you're a musician as well. But there's an innate beauty. You can sit there and play the keys, and you can do everything structurally right. But there's something, it's at a different level again, isn't it? And it's not that we don't figure out how to play, how to play things perfectly, but there's this innate beauty. And I think that's the message of this book, is let life, in all its ups and messy downs, let it find the beauty in the middle of the crisis, in the middle of the mess. You don't have to get life worked out in order to appreciate the beauty of it. Live in the moment. It's almost very Eastern. I think I was thinking about this. How does this differ to Buddhism, for instance? Because this is very Eastern. It's not Western. And it's interesting that it's in our Bible. I think the difference is that I would say probably Eastern religions, a lot of it's very similar, and it's in the world today. You mentioned some of it, being centered. That's being aware, living in the moment. That's all very much in vogue language. And some of the Christians listening to this might think it's all New Age. I don't. I actually think that you'll see this in Ecclesiastes. Being in the moment is the message of Ecclesiastes. I think the difference is it's the way we live in the moment. You've said that if we live in the moment and we go, I'm going to appreciate what God has done for me in this moment. I'm going to find God in this moment, in the pain, in the hurt, because He's present. That's different to maybe some aspects of Eastern religion, which kind of want you to separate from the moment. The way to receive enlightenment is you get so disconnected from the moment that it doesn't actually affect you. I think that's probably the main difference. But being aware of the moment,
I'm not an expert in this in any of this, but the impression I've got from comparing like the Christian tradition of meditation and Eastern traditions of meditation is, in Eastern meditation, it is about emptying
Yes.
your mind.
Yeah.
Whereas in Christian traditions of meditation, it's about kind of emptying of what it has, but then filling it
Yeah, I think
with
that's the key.
scripture or with God or
That's
something.
that's the way to do it. You hit it
Yeah.
on the nail on the head. And that's what he's advocating for. He's not saying empty. He's saying be in this moment. Enjoy that glass of wine. Enjoy it. Just live that moment and go, that's a nice glass of wine. Thank you, Lord. I mean, that's the whole essence of the Jewish prayer. Every time they would take the cup, they would say, blessed are you, Lord of the God of the universe, who gives us the fruit of the vine. It's like a reminder that this is a beautiful thing, you know, and whatever it might be, enjoy that moment. Yeah. All right. Well, where else do you want to go in chapter 9? Anything else there you want to point out?
Yeah, there's a little bit at the end. Looking at there's this interesting story. He says, "Here's another bit of wisdom." This is verse 13. "That has impressed me as I've watched the way our world works. There was a small town with only a few people, and a great king came with his army and besieged it. A poor, wise man knew how to save the town, and so it was rescued. But afterwards, no one thought to thank him. So even though wisdom is better than strength, those who are wise will be despised if they are poor. What they say will not be appreciated for long." In a way, it's sort of thinking that's a bit of a sad story. But then I'm sort of, I guess, in this mode of thinking of the moment. Would it, if I was wise and I knew that no one was going to thank me, would I still save the town?
Yes. Yeah. Would you sit back and go, well, I've got the answers, but you're not prepared to listen, so you're not gonna celebrate me, so over to you. Sort the problem out yourself. Yeah.
Like of course
you would. You'd use your
save
wisdom.
the town. Yeah.
Yeah. And why would you use that? What about wisdom would compel you to save the town?
Well, I think it's the town. I think it's the people.
The people.
I
Yeah.
think it's the relationship with the people.
That's it.
And there are a few other hints throughout Ecclesiastes that maybe one of these things that might be an exception to this meaninglessness is other people.
Yeah. Great.
And our relationships with other people.
So instead of living to find happiness in our work, all the stuff he does in Ecclesiastes 2, work, money, alcohol, jobs, everything, success, all those sorts, fame, all those things. Instead of all those things, one of the keys you're saying is actually be other-centered.
Yeah.
You might find meaning in living a life that adds value to other people rather than trying to feel valuable because of external stuff.
Yeah. I don't know how much of that is in Ecclesiastes and how much is just
certainly
I don't
Jesus'
know, the teachings of Jesus. that
Well,
I'm
I would say
projecting back a little bit.
Yeah, we might come across some thoughts, but I do think that there's some value in that. I mean, that's the central message of the gospel. That if you give up your life, you'll find your life. So absolutely, you're on it. You're onto something there.
And I'm reminded as well of Jesus. I'm just seeing if I've written down the passage here. I think it's John chapter 9, where Jesus heals the blind man. And the disciples are asking him, who sinned that he would be born blind? Born blind.
Yeah.
Like it's not his fault.
Yeah.
And yet, it's basically the question of Ecclesiastes. Why do bad things happen to the innocent?
Yeah.
And Jesus
that was
is
deeply. They were asking that question because that's deeply entrenched in their culture that
Yeah.
bad stuff happens if you're bad.
Yeah, and I think they realized this seems unfair.
Yeah.
This seems so unfair. And Jesus is like, no. And this is about the glory of God, and he proceeds to heal the guy.
Yeah, turns it on its head completely. Yeah,
Like this is about it's an opportunity for love.
beautiful. So when the question comes, why is bad stuff happening? What you're saying there is what I hear you saying is a good way to view that is to actually turn the question on its head and go, what if this was an opportunity for God to do some good in the world?
Yeah,
What if this horrible thing could actually be redeemed? What if I could be part of bringing redemption despite the pain and the suffering and the uncertainty that I feel? What if I could actually be part of adding value to someone else?
that's the most powerful things, I think, in the way
Wow.
the way God works, the way the Holy Spirit works.
And that is true life.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I can put up with a lot of crap in my world. I can put up with a lot of hardship myself if I feel like my life is adding value to other people. As a father, I know that, but in lots of areas, as a pastor, I know that. I'll prepare to suffer if I feel as though it's helping other people find purpose and meaning in their world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's good. Excellent. Is
All
that
right.
chapter 9, is it?
Yeah, we should probably move on.
All right, chapter 10 coming up.
Alrighty, chapter 10. And I don't know, I kind of see this section as various proverbs about wisdom and uncertainty.
Yeah, observations, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A few bits of gold in there. If your boss is angry at you, don't quit. A quiet spirit can overcome even great mistakes.
That sounds more like it belongs in Proverbs, doesn't it?
Yes, yes.
It's an observation about life. But you compared to the previous chapter, he'd probably in the previous chapter be saying, if your boss is angry at you, don't quit. A quiet spirit, no matter how quiet your spirit is, it's still going to be sucky.
Yep.
Your boss is still not going to argue.
I know
with you.
that's what most of us think about our bosses sometimes.
Yeah, that's right.
But no, like it's starting to get more into some of the practical aspects. But then some of these verses go on, and I think as someone who suffers from anxiety a little bit triggering.
Okay.
I think when it starts saying things like, when you dig a well, you might fall in. When you demolish an old wall, you could be bitten by a snake. I know that a lot of the things that I do, especially when I'm in those darker times in my life, my mind would immediately go to all the things that could possibly go wrong,
So
and all the
worst-case
ways
scenario.
that people could be hurt or killed because of something I've done.
Yeah.
And that can be a really horrible place to be.
Yeah.
And you know, when you work in a quarry, stones might fall and crush you. When you chop wood, there is a danger with each stroke of your axe. And so that, on the one hand, that starts to trigger my anxiety, but I think having worked through a lot of this, it prompts me now to think, okay, if my response isn't anxiety, like if it's not supposed to be anxiety, what should it be? How should I feel about this? And I guess that's similar to what we've been talking about, that it's not necessarily about focusing on that, but just recognizing that sometimes things don't go according to plan, not dwelling on it necessarily.
Recognizing that sometimes our best efforts will come up short.
Yeah.
Our best intentions will come up short.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in any form of leadership or influence over people, there's going to be times when you're forced to make a decision that, there's never one perfect decision, because the moment you make a decision that makes someone happy, it invariably will make someone else unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the point is bad stuff is going to happen even when you're doing the right thing.
Yep.
You can be doing the right thing for the right reasons, and you'll still find that the wrong thing will happen.
Yeah. And then it in verse 10, it kind of starts to change the angle, change the perspective a little bit. And I think it kind of goes a bit more into the Proverbs direction.
Yes, it does.
Because it says, using a dull axe requires great strength, so sharpen the blade. That's the value of wisdom. It helps you succeed. And so it's saying, look, these things can happen. There's always risks in life. There's always uncertainties in life. But there are some things that we can do to make things a bit better, to make things more in our favor.
So if we start to apply the principle of sharpening our axe, then generally speaking, we're not going to stop the axe from falling off sometimes, but generally speaking, the axe is going to be more effective in life. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I think
cool.
there's a famous quote about a lumberjack who said that if his life depended upon his ability to cut down a tree in 5 minutes, he would spend 3 minutes sharpening the axe.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's it's that idea of taking the time to prepare, thinking about what you're doing, and those risks, you can bring down those risks quite a lot. You can
just by thinking them through wisely.
Yeah.
That's
Wisdom
great.
can really help us to mitigate those risks,
and
to manage those risks.
These are called the wisdom books for a reason. Wisdom, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, they throw it in there, but it's Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job really that are wisdom books. And this is the whole point, because he's saying there, you know, he says, sharpen the axe, sharpen the blade. That's the value of wisdom. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think these books are supposed to say, well, what's the wise thing to do in this instance? Okay, you're faced with the fact that sometimes you're going to chop down trees and the axe's head's going to cause someone some injury. Sometimes, you know, you could be demolishing an old wall and you could get bitten by a snake. So what's the wise thing to do?
Yep.
It's not saying you'll never be bitten by a snake, but maybe there's some wisdom in slowing down, bring it before God, asking what the wise thing to do is, oh, okay, maybe I should be a bit more, maybe I could put some gloves on. Maybe I could just be a bit more careful before I start pulling bricks out of the wall.
Yep.
So wisdom can sometimes, like you say, it's taking 3 minutes to sharpen the axe. Before I just jump in there and start to demolish the wall, let me do some wise steps that I might mitigate the risk or minimize the risk. I mean, you're an engineer. We do it in church life all the time. We do risk assessments.
Yep.
You would have to do risk assessment.
Absolutely.
And you never put in your policy that we are removing the risk.
Yeah.
Because you can't ever, if you put that in a policy, you've removed risk and something happens, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of litigation.
Yeah.
It's about risk minimization, isn't it? And life is about risk minimization.
Absolutely.
It's about wisely doing everything you can to minimize the chance of risk while all the while understanding, as Ecclesiastes says, that sometimes sucky stuff will still happen.
Yep.
That's beyond our control.
Yep. And that's been a part of the journey for me, because I'm a bit perfectionist. And so, if I've got 5 minutes, 5 minutes to cut down a tree, I won't spend 3 minutes sharpening the axe. I'd probably spend 4 minutes, 55 seconds sharpening the axe. And then, be surprised at the end when when disaster happens and I don't have firewood and I'm getting cold overnight or something like that. And it's
maybe that's where we differ. My personality is, if I've got 5 minutes to chop down the tree, I'm racing for that axe and I start chopping.
Yeah.
And I don't do the opposite.
Yeah.
I don't slow down enough to because I'm a perfectionist, but I just go, no, I'm task oriented. So I'm gonna get this tree chopped down and I need to, unaware that I'm trying to do it with a blunt axe. So I don't slow down enough. Isn't that interesting? We're very similar in some ways, but there's different
in others. Yeah. So that's, and I think that, part of that is being kind of grounded in reality and grounded in the world around us and feeling, not getting too carried away, I guess, in whether it's in preparing or in getting the job done.
Yeah.
But
living in the moment.
Yeah.
Enjoy that moment. Whether I'm sharpening the axe or chopping down the tree, enjoy the moment. That's
Absolutely.
great. Yeah.
There's another passage in here that stood out to me. Fools, this is verse 13, fools base their thoughts on foolish assumptions, so their conclusions will be wicked madness. They chatter on and on. No one really knows what is going to happen. No one can predict the future. And I really feel like that's, I don't know, maybe that's just my world at the moment. And with the world the way it is, it kind of depends on.
We're all a bit gun shy to declare that the world's going to be fantic, aren't we?
Yeah.
2024 is going to be your best year.
There's a lot happening in the world wherever you are. And, whatever social media are on, there are, fools chattering on and on all the time.
Yes, correct.
It seems like the world is just full of chatter at the moment. How do you feel that things are at the moment in your world? Do you feel like there's a lot of talk, a lot of people trying to predict the future, and no one really?
Yeah. And
I feel like people are starting to realize more that they don't.
Yes,
know.
And that's causing a tension and an anxiety. In itself. And by the time you're listening to this, we will have finished our Revelation series just prior to this. And one of the things I'm going to be bringing out of the Revelation series is this, I think the message of Revelation, which is we've often missed if we've come from a dispensational view of the book, is that ultimately people are looking for order. When Jesus shows up on the Olivet Discourse on the Mount of Olives and his disciples say, look at these beautiful stones. And Jesus says, I'll tell you what, one stone's not going to be left on another there. And they start to question, how's this going to happen? There's something in human nature that wants to assign meaning to everything, which is what the Ecclesiastes teacher is trying to do. He sets out to go, I want to define the meaning of life. Where is true purpose? Where is true satisfaction found? And there's something in us that wants to do that. And I think the message of this book especially is that we can't always assign meaning. And so there's people out in the world today that are anxious because they can't assign meaning. I've seen this in the church. Honestly, I distinctly noticed the significant less number of pastors and leaders on social media that I saw at the start of 2023 and start of 2024 going, 2023, 2024, they're going to be your best year. It used to be a very common thing. We're believing this is going to be your best year. And I realized that we had 2020 COVID, we had floods, we had famine, we had the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. People are now going, actually, are they coming to, like you said, they're coming to an awareness that I can't control everything.
Yeah.
And it is causing a degree of anxiety. And it does cause a degree of worry about the world. Whereas I think the message of Ecclesiastes would be live in that moment. Recognize, it says in verse 13, no one really knows what's going to happen. No one can predict the future. But if we're honest, I think we want to. We want to assign meaning to something that's happened. Oh, COVID happened because of this or whatever. And we might one day find out exactly whether it was a leak or, from the factory or whatever it might be. But the point is not that we shouldn't try to risk minimize and find out why something happened. But if we think that if we can tie a bow around everything and explain everything, then we'll be happy. Ecclesiastes teacher is saying you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yep.
Just recognize that you can't really predict life, but you can live in the moment.
Yep. Absolutely. I think it's a comfort.
Yes, comfort, which is back to what you said in chapter 9.
Yeah, because I know, like in my world, and the topic I'm not allowed to talk about because I'll just be talking your ear off all day with AI at the moment.
Yeah.
AI, by the time that this podcast has come out, the world of AI will have completely changed.
Yeah.
It's changing so fast, and what it's done is it has been constantly proving our assumptions foolish. A lot of the things we assumed computers could and couldn't do, they're just getting written off day by day.
Yeah.
Things are just, all of those assumptions of what we think the future is going to be, they're just being all wiped away.
We can't predict it. Now
we can't predict it, and we're getting stressed and angry and worried.
Anxious anxiety about it. And then, and I'm not sitting here as an AI expert. I mean, I love my chat GPT. I use it all the time on this podcast. I get that. But there is a sense in which I've got to go, I have to trust in my God.
Yeah.
If this is the end of the world, then I have to trust in God's goodness.
Yeah.
If this is going to become the best invention since sliced bread, I have to trust in God's goodness. Wherever on that spectrum I sit, I have no control. But what I do have control over is whether I trust God with my life.
Yep.
Whether AI turns out to be, enemy or friend. I have to trust God with that. And I think that's a good example of what this book's all about. We can't become overly anxious. Well, we can, but God's saying trust Him. Trust Him.
Yep.
Seek wisdom in Him, not wisdom in Zuckerberg or wisdom in Musk or wisdom in the authorities that are going to put requirements on AI. None of that. Let's just trust in God.
I think that's a good plan. Verse 19, I think, is an interesting one.
Yep.
This is another one of these verses.
It's a happy verse?
That we're trained not to say as Christians.
Okay.
A party gives laughter,
I see.
wine gives happiness, and money gives everything.
So, okay. So what do you think? What's his point? Because he's just gone, in chapter 2, he's basically said, I tried money and it was meaningless. It was hevel. So that can't be what he's saying.
No.
So what do you think he's saying?
I don't know. I think it's a bit of, in the context, it's probably talking about practical wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
In the context, it's probably talking about living in the moment.
Yep.
And I think living in the moment, the parties that we have and the friends that we have and, the food and drink that we have and the money that we have, these are gifts from God.
Yes.
And we should enjoy it while we have it.
That's the point.
We might not have it forever.
We might not have it forever. I think you said that so well. And that's what he's trying to say. See, money's not bad. And generally speaking, if we're honest, as much as we want to be spiritual Christians and all sound pious, generally speaking, life is easier with more money than less. Generally speaking. But good godly people have given up, renounced wealth for the kingdom of God. That's totally fine too. But generally speaking, life is easier with money rather than with less money. The problem is in chapter 2 is that the teacher tried to see whether he could find meaning in money. And that's the difference. What you're saying is enjoy the moment, have a splash of cologne, enjoy a cup of wine, all that thing we said, go to a party, it gives laughter, but recognize that if you're relying on that for your meaning, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yep.
Yeah. I think we're getting the point across.
I think so. I think we're getting there.
Yeah, I think
it can be a bit difficult to grasp. And certainly, I've spent years trying to work through this stuff in my own life.
Yeah, even we're doing it at a philosophical level now. And this is, I'm always wary when I teach on the book of Job or when I teach on the book of Ecclesiastes, which I've done on and off over the years. I'm always wary that it's very easy, and we're doing it right now. We're getting into philosophical conversations, but behind every philosophical conversation we have with a person is an experience, is a story, is a hurt, is a disappointment, is a pain.
Yeah.
So while these books are philosophical, they're designed to be read philosophically, wrestled with philosophically, but we must never weaponize these books.
Yeah.
You just talked about your journey. Thank you for being honest there. Your journey with depression and anxiety. There's reasons, there's experiences behind that. And while it's good to wrestle with the philosophy and how we can apply it to our life, there's nothing quite like actually having to apply it to a tangible disappointment or a pain or a loss.
Yep.
And that's where my pastor heart comes out. And I want to go, when I preach into a congregation, like we're here sitting here in Thirroul at the moment, I preach into my congregation. I'm preaching to people in all different arenas of life who are all experiencing different things. But applying this is a personal, one-on-one, heartfelt conversation where we hear someone's journey, we identify with it. We don't have to give the answer. You don't have to say, just have a party because you got to be fine. You don't have to even be telling people to get over the pain or, the last thing you want to do pastorally is sit with someone who'd lost a loved one tragically and just say, well, eat, drink because it's going to be okay. You don't do that.
Yeah.
It's not the way to use these books. I would say it's weaponizing these books.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that, I think when I said earlier, sort of contentment has sort of felt for me like a bit of a dirty word because it's like, it's that kind of abusive way of saying, just be quiet and be content with the little you have, and this should be enough for you. Why are you complaining? Why are you hurting?
Yeah.
It can be very easy to sort of say, oh, well, the right answer is we should be content. As Paul says, being content in everything, whatever my situation is. It can be very easy to sort of demand that of ourselves. Say, this is what the right answer is. This is how you should feel,
or demand it of other people.
Yes,
yeah, we've all sat in connect group meetings where we've had that person who just wants to give the pet scripture answer when someone's pouring their heart out, and all it does is just diminish the value of that person's pain. It might be well intended. I'm not saying the person is necessarily trying to wound. But giving that whole, Paul says be content in everything, that has devalued that person's pain.
Yeah.
That person's personal journey. So, that's why I think we do need to take this from a realm of philosophy and put it back in a realm of anthropology, back into people's lives.
Yep.
Yeah.
A party gives laughter, wine gives happiness, money gives everything. It's not something you want to preach necessarily to people who are, maybe feeling alone.
Yep.
Maybe feeling unhappy, maybe feeling not having enough money. This is it's not like just have money and you'll be feeling better.
Clearly, that's not what he's saying.
It's not.
No,
that's not what it is.
He's saying live in the moment.
Yeah, and I think
there is beauty to be found in the hevel.
And what I'm finding is there is a whole lot more beauty and wonder in the moment than we often think. There is a lot to find to be thankful for.
Yes, if we take that time to slow down and sharpen our axe and find wisdom, we can find beauty in the moment.
There's a lot there.
I knew this was going to be a great conversation with you because you're a deep thinker, and I think this book demands that. And you've got your own journey you're wrestling with, so it's it's really thoughtful.
Yeah.
Anything else in chapter 10?
No, I think we'll move on.
Chapter 11.
Chapter 11, verse 1, send your grain across the seas, and in time profits will flow back to you. But divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risks might lie ahead. Again, I think this is going on with the practical wisdom. This is good business advice. I think this is, even in the modern day, this is the sort of thing, don't take financial advice from me. I'm not a financial advisor, or I certainly am not good with investments and money and this sort of thing.
Neither am I. It's not my thing.
But this is what I've heard.
Yes.
Over and over.
Yeah.
Divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risks might lie ahead.
So let's reverse engineer these words back to the stuff in the previous couple of chapters where he said sucky stuff happens. This is actually wisdom to help countermand this risk minimization.
Yeah.
And how often as Christians, I've seen this so many times in life where Christians go, I've heard from God, I'm starting a business, I'm doing this. They get 12 months in, it's tough, it's hard, and they go, well, maybe I didn't hear from God. I'm giving up and all that sort of stuff. Because they had this mentality that, well, I've heard from God, it's going to be happen. It's going to happen like that, and it's going to be perfect, and it's going to be blessed. But generally speaking, most people don't turn a profit in their business in the first 12 months.
No,
That's just the nature of life. It's the way it is. There are exceptions, but they are the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah.
And I think we've our world and our YouTube culture is set up. We think, you ask every kid today what they want to be. They want to be a YouTube star. Well, not every one of them is going to be.
Yeah.
But because that's what we're constantly confronted with. And what I hear him saying here is, hey, diversify your portfolio.
Yep.
Because some things are going to go well, some things are going to go bad. So don't throw all of it into one and risk. Yes, with high risk comes high risk of loss as well.
It has struck me, and I've heard other people say it as well, that the people we tend to hear are the successful ones. They're the exceptions. Yep. They're the people who've, they might have just gotten lucky.
Totally.
And so we tend to hear all these people, get rich quick schemes and all that sort of thing, and it's
and then they go on Instagram and Instagram ads and they start saying to you, I got my first 5 leads in the first 60 seconds, and everyone starts to go, well, that sounds like it's easy, but that's not life. No. And this is what I think he's saying here, the teacher is saying here in Ecclesiastes, and I say this often, I actually think consistency is the most underrated value or character trait in life.
Yeah, that's good.
Just keep turning up.
I like
Stay faithful. Yes, sometimes you'll take a quantum leap ahead in life. But life is like a game of snakes and ladders. You can be walking along and suddenly you tread on a snake and you go all the way back to square number 3 again. That's life. But if you stay consistent and keep putting one foot in front of another, keep turning up, eventually you're going to get ahead.
Yep.
It's the whole tortoise and the hare thing.
Yeah. It says in verse 6, plant your seed in the morning and keep busy all afternoon, for you don't know if profit will come from one activity or the other.
Such good wisdom.
Maybe both.
Yeah. It's good wisdom. Yeah. I love it. So it's very practical, based upon reflecting on the fact that life will have its ups and downs.
Yep.
So stay faithful. Keep turning up. It's great.
One I'm not sure quite what it means. Maybe this is a good wait, what?
Sure. Wait, what?
When clouds are heavy, the rains come down. Whether a tree falls north or south, it stays where it falls. I guess it's kind of saying, sometimes what's done is done.
Yep.
I'm not sure what that means. When the tree falls at north or south, it stays where it falls.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know either. What's he trying to say there? I think you're probably saying that is that. What verse is it? I'm just trying to find it so I can just.
Sorry, verse 3.
Verse 3 is right at the
Might have gone
right
back
at the
a
top.
little bit, yeah.
There we go. Where clouds are heavy, the rain comes down. So it's an observation. I think it's just an observation based on what he's just said before, that it's going to rain sometimes.
Yep.
There's going to be situations. Yeah, I think it's just an observation of stuff's going to happen according to the way it is. Be okay with that.
Yep.
There's no point trying to force the tree to fall one way or another.
Yep.
I think that's what it's saying.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't think it probably is. Maybe it's trying to say more than that, but I don't think so. I think that's it.
And this is one that really speaks to me in my world with my particular personality. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest.
Yes. Okay.
It's something that I think it's it's one of those things that you really know is an issue for you when you start seeing it in other people and getting really frustrated with other people when they get into this analysis paralysis.
Okay, so
overthinking things.
So when you see other people
anything,
doing analysis paralysis, you get frustrated with
that makes me really frustrated.
But you're saying you do that yourself?
Because I do that myself.
Right. Okay. So what is it? What is it about other people that makes you frustrated when you do it yourself? Is it because it points to something in yourself? Is that what
I think it's just reminding me of
Okay.
my failings.
Okay, gotcha.
At
Yeah.
some unconscious
Yeah.
level.
And the thing is, if we have this whole idea of we're going to diversify our portfolio, we're just going to work faithfully. I mean, yes, they're using the analogy of money here, but it applies to any area of life. It applies to relationships, serving in church, any area you might come up with. If we have this attitude of I'm going to keep turning up, I'm not going to go gung ho. I'm just going to be faithful. Then sooner or later the rain will come, and it might not be perfect, but at least I'll get some harvest, as opposed to waiting for the perfect conditions and probably get no harvest.
I think in economics they call it opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost,
The cost of not acting.
not acting on it. Yeah,
And
gotcha.
because sometimes it can be a risk to step out and do something, like planting crops or planting or cutting down a tree or
Yeah.
starting a business or whatever
Yeah,
whatever it
starting a
is.
relationship, anything. Yes,
Yeah,
it
there
applies
are
to
risks.
every area of
There
life.
are always risks, but there's also a risk to not doing anything. So
Yes.
you kind of can't avoid it. So
No. So he's saying, have a go.
yeah,
Yeah, have a go in life. Yeah, I like it.
I like that. Another one that speaks to me as a scientist. Just as you cannot understand the path of the wind or the mystery of a tiny baby growing in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activity of God who does all things.
There's something in me that wants to, though.
I know. And I think, as you were saying earlier, you do see a lot of the beauty. You see a lot of beauty in the world that you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Yes.
When you really dig into how these things work and
Yeah.
discovering things. But when you look at, and this as an example, the path of the wind. So I've done a bit of this sort of thing in my line of work. The path of the wind, is determined by these equations called the Navier-Stokes equations for fluid flow. And they are quite famous for being very badly behaved.
The equations are.
The equations are.
Right.
This is naughty mathematics. This
Okay.
is mathematics that does not like to play nicely.
It's like random theory, chaos theory
Yes,
kind of stuff,
this
is it?
exactly chaos
Right,
theory.
chaos theory, okay.
This is why it's so hard to predict the weather.
Right.
We can really only get reliable predictions for the weather about 2 days in advance.
Right.
Reasonable within about a week, and we can get sort of general weather for about a month ahead. But beyond that,
Yeah.
no, you can't, because these equations, they're just so chaotic that anything can happen.
So this keeps pointing us back to God. While it's okay to try to figure out how the world works, how to, what we are trying to do there is we are trying to put a degree of structure to meaning and life and science and nature and our lives and so on. And that's okay to that point, as long as all the while we recognize that there's more we don't know. So for instance, like you're saying, I mean, they had no concept of predicting the wind.
No.
In 2,500 years ago, this is 3,000 years ago, they had no concept of predicting the wind whatsoever. They wouldn't have even entered their mind. They had no way of defining what the wind was or how it worked. They felt it.
Yeah.
But that was it. Jesus says you can feel the wind, but you can't see it. You don't know where it comes from. So they had no concept. We now have a concept to be able to do it. But what I'm hearing you say is even with our concept, there's still a degree of unpredictability about it. And we have to go, that puts us in awe of an incredibly big God whose ways are above our ways, who will never understand. And in that way, I guess it's comforting.
Even with all of our supercomputers, these equations are they're too hard.
They're too hard. I mean, quantum physics is another level of that again. That gets us to that level where we go, quantum physics makes no sense, and yet it clearly works because I've got a laptop in front of me, I've got an iPad in front of me, which is relying on quantum theory to make it work. So it works, but we don't understand how it works or why it works. And that should make us go, okay, there's nothing wrong with trying to keep figuring it out, but also it should, and as scientists, and this principle applies in all areas of life, no matter where we are or what we do, it should come back to this sense of hold things loosely. And I stand in wonder of the fact that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. God is so big, and in his infinite wisdom, he will figure out right from wrong.
Yep, absolutely. And this is something that I think there's a famous quote from one of the people who invented a lot of the original quantum mechanics theories and that sort of things. That, this was like 100 years ago. They said, we now have all of the mathematics, all of the foundations to describe everything.
Well, they're still trying to search for the theory for everything, aren't they?
But yeah, it's like we've got the foundations there. We know what it is. It's just too complicated for us to be able to use.
Even Sheldon Cooper couldn't figure it out.
No.
I mean, you're right. It's like it's there, but it's still hevel. It's still And for those, I mean, we're probably boring those that aren't interested in science, but the theory of everything, it's the whole Stephen Hawking thing, the whole search for to reconcile quantum mechanics with Einstein in theory and put the whole thing together so it all fits. That has been the search. That has been the holy grail of theoretical science for the last 50 years, probably, well, at least I would imagine.
Oh, yeah, probably 100
years. Yeah, it's probably since Einstein, right? So there we have this thing of trying to put everything together and make it fit. And that's hevel. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try, but if our whole purpose is we're not going to be happy until we do that, that's the book of Ecclesiastes again. It's like embrace the fact that it's messy. Embrace the fact that you can't predict whether something is going to appear as a wave or an atom. Embrace the fact that you just don't get it. That's okay. Enjoy the fact you don't get it.
Yeah.
Magnify God in that.
It's the limits of wisdom.
The limits of wisdom.
This is something that is quite, that we talk about a lot in this passage, is that, wisdom is good. Wisdom is great at helping us reduce our risk. Science has given us the ability to grow so much more food and feed so many more people. Science has given us a whole lot of wisdom that we can use to make the world so much better. But there's always going to be limits to our wisdom.
Yeah.
And we need to be, and this is something I think a lot of scientists end up struggling with, is the fact that you can't answer everything. You can't always get that final answer. You need to be.
Is it ironic that scientists say, because that's life. We can't, as a pastor, I can't answer every question.
Yeah.
As a scientist, you can't answer every question. No, it's impossible for a finite human being to answer infinite questions.
Yep.
No matter how much, some elements of science will say, well, we're going to be able to. Maybe we will, but maybe we'll just find, as has been human nature throughout all scientific advancement, that there'll just be more questions. We think we've gotten to the end of one question and we've just crested a mountain peak and there's another whole mountain peak in front of us with more questions. I think that's the beauty of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just as you cannot understand the path of the wind or the mystery of a tiny baby growing in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activity of God.
We just spent 10 minutes waffling around what that verse says in one verse.
I know. So yeah, I think we're starting to move on now to sort of a different theme, I think, in Ecclesiastes, the young and the old.
Oh, yeah.
Young people, this is verse 9, young people, it's wonderful to be young. Enjoy every minute of it. Do everything you want to do. Take it all in. But remember that you must give an account to God for everything you do. So refuse to worry and keep your body healthy. But remember that youth, with a whole life before you, is meaningless. It's smoke.
It's smoke again. Because the youth is gone. It just seems like yesterday I was a young person. Now I'm an old person.
Yep. Enjoy it while you've got it. But, realize that it's...
And don't worship it.
Yeah.
That's the point, is that don't turn your youth into a god, an idol, because it's going to be gone tomorrow. Yeah, live in the moment.
I think that leads us into chapter 12.
Chapter 12, the summary.
So, chapter 12, which comes across to me as the grumpy old man chapter.
Okay.
So, don't let the excitement of youth cause you to forget your Creator. Honor him in your youth before you grow old and say life is not pleasant anymore. Remember him before the light of the sun, moon, and stars is dim to your old eyes and rain clouds continue to darken your sky. Remember him before your legs, the guards of your house, start to tremble, and before your shoulders, the strong men stoop. Remember him before your teeth, your few remaining servants, stop grinding. And before your eyes, the women looking through the windows see dimly.
It's a beautiful piece of poetry. It's very illuminating, isn't it? You feel for this old guy.
I know, and it's sort of like, I don't think, I wouldn't call either of us necessarily old, but
I'm getting there.
Mature enough to start to understand a little bit of what he's talking about here. I know, I know I've started to notice a few aches and pains here and there.
Yep. Oh no, I'm getting them, mate.
We need to look after. But what do you think this means? Don't let the excitement of youth cause you to forget your Creator. And he says sort of over and over, remember Him, remember Him, remember Him. What's it mean to remember your Creator while you're young?
While you can. Well, I think he's probably, the way I read it is he's referring to the fact that when you're functional, when he's describing the fact, if you look at what he's saying, one day you're going to lose all these faculties. So while you have these faculties, you have a degree of mastery. You almost can you feel like you can shape your life. He's going, hey, just remember, just because you can run fast, you can see clearly, you don't need to wear glasses all the time or whatever it might be, just because you've got a degree of strength about you and you feel like you've got structure and form in your life, just remember it's still Hevel. And in that moment, when you feel self-sufficient, remember your God. Keep coming back to that living in the moment, embracing the fact that this gift, this freedom, this life that you're experiencing, this youth that you're experiencing now is a gift from God. Because I think what I would say would happen is if you don't do that, if you don't recognize that your youthful zest for life, young people, if you don't realize that it's still a gift from God, it will be gone before you know it. And if you have put all your purpose and meaning in your youthfulness of life, what will happen is one day you'll be old and you'll become this cynical old man or cynical old woman who is now begrudging the fact that you don't have what you once thought was meaningful. So I think that's what he's going at. He's going, stay in the moment. Stay thankful to God, whether you're young or old.
Do you think he's feeling a bit of regret?
Yeah, it speaks of regret, doesn't it? Yeah. Because I think he's going, but he's almost like he's telling his younger self. The old thing of what would I say to my younger self?
Yeah.
I wonder if he's doing a bit of that.
Yeah.
He's looking back and going, you know what? I think I missed it. I spent all this time reflecting on trying to get meaning out of my life from youth. I missed it.
Yep.
Yeah. I didn't remember my Creator in those days, and now I'm regretting not remembering Him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's an aspect of that we come to a little later in this chapter is that, remember your Creator, take this opportunity to do good, I think. Make the most of the opportunity when you're young and fit and able to do lots of good things. Take those opportunities to do good and live for God.
Yeah, because they're the things you'll take with you into your future.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's a good point, because once I'm at that point where my eyes are failing and my teeth are stopping grinding and all those rich metaphors he used, I'm not going to be able to necessarily do as much. I might live with some regret. But if I get to my old age and I feel like my life has counted and made a difference, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I feel like, okay, maybe I can't do much now, but I can look back with a degree of satisfaction and go, my life added value to other people. Because that's what's going to matter, is not all the money you earn, not all the fame and success you have. In the end, at your funeral, it's always going to be about how did my life affect other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the meaning is going to come.
It's quite a, it's kind of feels a bit sort of, depressing or feeling a bit like feeling a bit grumpy or something like that in this passage. But it's just one thing that strikes me with it is just how beautiful a lot of the imagery is. Remember your Creator now while you are young. This is verse 6. Before the silver cord of life snaps and the golden bowl is broken. Don't wait until the water jar is smashed at the spring and the pulley is broken at the well. So very rich in imagery, very poetic in the way it
it's actually a beautiful few
expresses
verses of writing.
Yeah. If you can sort of get past the, this is talking about something not so pleasant, it's actually doing a really good job of talking about it.
You can sort of imagine an old person sitting there feeling these things, feeling like a cracked bowl. Once I had beauty, but now there's nothing. Maybe I was a beautiful looking person, or now it's all gone, or I don't have that attractiveness about me. I don't have that meaning about my life anymore. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of writing, actually.
Yeah.
That's kind of how he ends. Like the teacher
Yeah.
ends on verse 7, and then verse 8 is the author, the compiler, commenting at the started the first chapter of first part of chapter 1, now finishing off the end of the book as well.
Yeah. So in verse 9, keep this in mind. The teacher was considered wise. He taught the people everything he knew. He listened carefully to many proverbs, studying and classifying them. The teacher sought to find just the right words to express truths clearly. And some beautiful words, I think, in that passage.
Yeah.
The words of the wise are like cattle prods, painful but helpful. Their collected sayings are like a nail-studded stick with which a shepherd drives the sheep.
And I think we started this conversation by pretty much that first bit of chapter 9 you read. That was pretty nail-studded stick, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was painful. Like, we don't want to hear that.
I know.
What?
I know.
So you're telling me that I can do my best and life's still going to suck sometimes? And that's a nail-studded, that's a cattle prod right there.
Yeah.
But it's good for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it does a good job of really bringing out the that message that, this isn't just about, the pain. This is about, something good. This is about living your life well for God.
Yeah. Actually
in the
finding
midst of all of this.
satisfaction and meaning in amongst the meaninglessness of the life. Yes.
Yeah. But my child, let me give you some further advice. Be careful, for writing books is endless and much study wears you out.
So I guess he's summing it up by going, it's good to study, it's good to seek meaning and purpose, it's good to research, but just remember what this teacher's been saying is that if you're trying to find your meaning and understanding everything, don't do that. You're going to let yourself down. You're going to wear yourself out.
Yep, that's me.
Yeah, that's me too. That's me for sure.
Um,
And I love this final bit in verse 13.
Yeah.
Here's the final. He says, this is the whole story. Here's how the author refers to the teacher's summary. So this is like the final summary of the summary. He's summing up what the teacher's been saying between chapter 1 and halfway through chapter 1 and all the way through to the last bit of chapter 12. He says, fear God, obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. God will judge everything we do, including every secret thing, whether hidden, good or bad. Keep putting God first. Through the ups and downs of life, God will judge it.
yeah.
Judge doesn't mean bad necessarily. I mean, judge can be a good thing. Justice is a good thing. So even though you might not see justice in this life, have faith that your God, even though sometimes sucky stuff will happen despite your faithfulness, if you stay the course, one day God will bring about justice.
Yep.
That's the summary of it.
That's it.
Did you have anything else there you thought of?
No, not really. Just looking over that summary and sort of feeling like, I think the first time I read this summary, I'm sort of feeling like, no, I don't really get it. This doesn't seem right. Looking at this doesn't seem what the rest of the book
Seems to be saying.
seems to be saying. This seems to be saying something else.
Okay, tell me more.
But I think that was just a bit of because I was reading it sort of at a surface level, I wasn't really going down to that deeper level of understanding what it's really trying to say, what it's really trying to convey. That I kind of had to engage with it personally and think about my own walk and my own issues to be able to say, actually, there's a lot of the things that I thought were meaningful, they are meaningless. They are smoke.
Yes. Okay, they are smoke.
They are smoke.
Yeah.
And it says everything is meaningless. Well, do I agree with that? Do I agree that everything is meaningless? And then it says later, well, fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. That seems to imply some kind of a meaning. But maybe that smoke analogy is better.
Yes, I think that's where the point, because it's not that it's meaningless, it's just not grasped, it's just not formed up, structured.
Yeah.
Life is not like that. And yet the promise here, and this is how I read this last bit, when he's saying God will judge everything we do, including every secret, good or bad, I think that's prophetically speaking forward. It's not promising that in this life you're going to see the structure. In this life you're going to see the answer to every question. It's actually hope-filled. I think it's projecting forward, knowing that one day God will do justice. I might not see it in this life, but I have hope that if God is just and fair and true, that in the end I'll look back and it will make sense. So it's hope-filled. And that'll now allow me to some degree to eat the food and drink the wine and enjoy the life now, though it might not be ideal or might not be what I was expecting or hoping for, because now I can live in this moment knowing that God will redeem that moment one day.
So if I ask, what's the meaning of life? What do you believe is the meaning of life? Is that it?
Yeah, I think he seems to be saying here, really, that he's saying if you want to find true meaning, you're going to find true meaning in a relationship with the Lord.
Yep.
You're going to find true meaning in trusting in a God who one day is true to his word and one day will bring justice and fairness, and we will see that. And that is the meaning. That is the ultimate meaning of life. And that will play out in us adding value to other people's lives.
Yep. And it's trusting in a God who we can't understand, who is beyond our ability to reason and to predict. But yeah, there's that when we live day to day with God, we see, we can see it. We can see that happening. We can see God working through relationships.
Yeah, and there's so many things in my life where I look back and go, wow, if God had have given me what I thought I wanted at that time, I'd be worse off. That's the infinite wisdom of God, isn't it? It doesn't make sense at the time. It seems harsh, but now we're going to amp that up a whole different level. And the thing is, oftentimes, if God was what I thought God should be, if God had done what I thought he should have done to others, he wouldn't have shown me grace. Because I don't show enough grace to other people, and yet I'm quite happy to receive grace from God. We were talking about that with the book of Jonah. It's like, I'm happy to receive grace from God, but I don't want you to receive grace.
Yeah.
And that's the ethical question. We serve a God who is infinitely just and somehow is able to be infinitely gracious at the same time.
Yeah.
He can marry together that tension between showing one person grace and showing one person justice. Now, in our mind, if the very nature of being gracious towards somebody else can feel unjust towards someone else. So if I show grace towards someone who has mistreated somebody else and I show them grace, I can understand how the person who's been mistreated may feel like, well, that's not fair.
Yeah.
That's actually unjust. If you were really a just God, you would actually judge that person. And that just shows me this infinite, far above us God, that he's able to somehow show infinite grace and infinite justice and marry those two that is impossible. There's no way I can do it, but he can do it.
I know. I feel like the whole Bible, from start to finish, is struggling with this idea.
It is.
This grace and justice.
Yep. It's a human condition, isn't it?
We get a lot of different perspectives throughout the Bible of different people seeing it differently at different times and different perspectives on what this means to have both grace and justice. Yes. And this particular viewpoint in Ecclesiastes, I think it's a really good point of view. Certainly not the only point of view.
No, but it's very thought provoking.
But
I actually love it because it's a beautiful piece of literature, and I think it really does. It does shed light on the human heart in incredible ways. So now we're going to take a complete jump forward, and we're going to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1.
Corinthians, Paul's first epistle to the Corinthians.
Which is actually his second, by the way.
Yes. I was reading about that. Apparently there's a mention of another little letter that didn't quite survive. Apparently a very spicy letter.
Yeah, well, there's actually, that's a little, I think there might be there's a spicy one in between 1 and 2 as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The severe letter, I think Paul calls it in 2 Corinthians. Yeah.
Yes. But even 1 Corinthians is a bit spicy.
Yes, yeah. Paul was having his challenge with the Corinthian church. His heart was for them, but he was having his challenge with them.
Yeah. Verse 1, this letter is from Paul, chosen by the will of God to be an apostle of Jesus Christ, and from our brother Sosthenes. So that was actually a big, wait, what? Moment.
It was?
For me.
Why was that?
Sosthenes. There's a second author.
Oh, okay.
Credited.
Yeah, okay. So, yes.
I'm like, oh, wait. I thought it was just Paul.
Ah, okay. Gotcha. There's actually 2 authors here.
Someone else.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, looking further on, it seems to be, mostly just Paul talking about, talking about himself in first language.
You'll actually find that he often will say Paul, Silas, and Timothy
Yeah.
to the church at such and such.
Yeah.
They're collaborative.
Yeah.
Whether he's calling the shots, but it seems like he's including.
Yeah, and
them
I've heard
in
it said that it's was probably him dictating it and Sosthenes writing it down.
That's right. Sosthenes
sort of
may
thing.
have been one of the right. Well, actually, I'm not sure because some of them actually get a different author to write them down and they mention it at the end. But
Yep.
it would have been quite normal for a scribe to write down these letters. Yes.
Especially because when I was looking back at Acts chapter 18 of Paul in Corinth, Sosthenes was actually from Corinth.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
He was one of the guys there. Had a bit of trouble with the Jews, got beaten up in court at one time. So interesting story there, I think. This is Sosthenes is someone who they would have known and they would have respected.
A local.
Yeah.
Yep. Which we're going to see as you move through the rest of the. We're only doing 1 Corinthians this year, but you're going to see Paul's relationship with the Corinthian church was a challenging one.
Yeah.
He faced issues of them not accepting him, him feeling like he'd let them down, they'd let him down. It was a pretty heartbreaking. I think if you had asked Paul, what's the toughest thing you'd done in ministry, I reckon he'd put this up there with his shipwrecks, actually, is that his relationship with these people in Corinth. He loved them deeply, but he felt like they didn't love him back.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like a fairly rough time from what it says in Acts. A lot of like traditional Jewish resistance to the gospel in that part of the world. This was written, I think, 3 years after he founded the church in Corinth while he was in Ephesus.
While he's in Ephesus, that's correct, yep. So a bit of background history from Acts 18 you were talking about there. So Paul had been up in the north of Greece, Philippi, across, and then he'd been run out of town in Philippi after preaching. He had headed west and he had been run out of town in Berea by the locals from Philippi, Thessalonica, then Berea. They didn't like him. Then they headed him south. He went down on a boat all the way to Athens. He preached a sermon in Athens, which by Paul's standards was pretty unsuccessful, had a few followers, but it was a pretty unsuccessful sermon. He left Athens and went to Corinth. And on the way to Corinth, I think we won't see it today, but it's in chapter 2 of 1 Corinthians. He says, when I came to you, he says, I didn't use lofty words and impressive wisdom to tell you of God's plan. I determined when I was with you, I would preach Christ and him crucified. And what has happened, it's probably about a couple of days' walk from Athens to Corinth. Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, drive it in an hour and a half. Yep. A couple of days' walk, something like that. And
you've been touring around that,
I have
part of the world. Have you been to Corinth?
Yes, I've been to Corinth. Yeah, I've been to ancient. It's a great place, ancient Corinth. Yeah, it's beautiful. And when he got there, it's like he tried the wise, persuasive sermon in Athens in front of the Areopagus, and it didn't work. So he says, I'm going to come here and I'm going to preach Jesus. And he did see significant results. A lot of people found Jesus, as you read through in Acts 18, I think it is there. And now he's moved on to Ephesus, which is across the other side of the Aegean over in Turkey. And there's a lot of back and forward going on. And he actually had visited them at some point. I think it was either before or after this. I think it might be in between 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. He refers to the fact he had to go and visit them because things got out of hand. So he can hear his heart is quite, and he obviously got this brother Sosthenes there. He's really has a heart for these people.
Yep. So, I'm writing to God's church in Corinth, to you who have been called by God to be his own holy people. He made you holy by means of Jesus Christ, just as he did for all the people everywhere who call on the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, their Lord and ours. May God our Father and Lord Jesus Christ give you grace and peace. And
grace and peace is a very common way that he references and greets people in his letters. It's just occurred to me, I've never thought about this before, and I don't ever remember reading it. I think based on the fact that Sosthenes is a local, I actually think maybe Sosthenes has come to Paul with a series of questions from the Corinthian church. Because later on, you'll see in the 1 Corinthians, he'll say, now for the questions you ask, let me write to you about them. Yeah, I wonder if Sosthenes had jumped on a boat, crossed the Aegean to meet Paul and say, hey, church back home, we've got some questions for you, Paul. I mean, they couldn't send an email.
Yeah.
And then maybe Paul is sending Sosthenes back, having spent time writing the letter, briefing Sosthenes.
Yeah.
Sosthenes is going to go back, present the letter, and actually answer some of those questions that have been fielded to Paul.
Yeah. That's something I sort of get as, there's lots of sort of names being dropped and a lot of people talking about all these, a lot of name dropping, I guess you'd say. But it really starts to give a sense of that there's a community there.
Yes.
that this isn't just one person and like one big important minister of a church speaking to the community or something like that. There's a lot of people here. There's a lot of people involved, and I think as we'll see very shortly, that makes things a little bit messy.
It makes it messy when there's people involved. People are messy. We're all messy. That's right. Yeah.
Messy, but also at the same time kind of normal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just feels like, this is real life.
Yes. Yeah, this is the real nitty-gritty of church life, family life, community life, isn't it?
Yeah.
It isn't all nice and neat and tidy.
Yes. So, there's a bit of a thanksgiving. Paul saying, I always thank my God for you and the gracious gifts he has given you. And he talks a lot here about, the gifts of God, God giving you every spiritual gift you need. He will keep you strong. God will do this, for he is faithful. This idea of, I guess, just pointing to God and pointing to our ultimate reliance on his faithfulness and his generosity with us.
Yeah, it's reminding the gifts you have come from God. And I'm thankful for those.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that I get the opportunity to sit down and listen to your gifts today. That's that attitude, you've got something that adds value to my life. And I'm grateful for that. And I think that's what Paul's saying.
Yep. And then he goes on to start
addressing the challenges.
Addressing some of these challenges. Yes, this is where things start to get a little bit more spicy. I appeal to you, dear brothers and sisters, by the authority of our Lord Jesus Christ. I mean, when you start something like that, it's sort of like...
the next words aren't going to be really pleasant.
Okay, to live in harmony with each other.
It sounds easy, but...
Let there be no divisions in the church. Rather be of one mind, united in thought and purpose. For some members of Chloe's household have told me about your quarrels, my dear brothers and sisters. Some of you are saying, I'm a follower of Paul. Others are saying, I follow Apollos, or I follow Peter, or I follow only Christ. Has Christ been divided into factions? Was I, Paul, crucified for you? Were any of you baptized in the name of Paul? Of course not. It definitely feels like, wherever there are people, they tend to form groups,
factions,
cliques, politics.
Yep.
It's
human nature.
It's human nature. So I guess and
I think that Paul, you'll see this time and time again in Paul's writings. The reason he speaks so harshly to this is the exact antithesis of his vision for the church.
Yeah.
The world is like that. Paul would say, look, the world has cliques. The world has factions. The world says you have to think like us, dress like us, behave like us to be one of us. He says the idea of Christ's church is that you're supposed to be able to be different.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be able to appreciate the differences. Back to Ecclesiastes, appreciate the fact that someone has a different political view to you. Appreciate the fact that some of us love talking about astrophysics and some don't. Appreciate the beauty of that.
Yeah.
And actually, rather than just clock off and go, oh, they're not my people, Paul's vision for the church is you can actually say, they are my people. I can learn from them. I can appreciate the beauty of the diversity. And that's what Paul's trying to get here, because they're forming up factions. He's going, you missed the point. You're uniting not around Paul, Apollos, Cephas. You're uniting around Jesus.
Yep. And I think that's certainly been my experience in the church. That the church is, one of the wonderful things about church is how diverse we all are. Because I know that, like with my particular personality and my particular interests, it's not people with my interests don't often become Christians. Like there's when you talk, scientists and
gotcha.
Engineers maybe.
Yeah,
engineers. I find that there's a lot of engineers are Christians. Not so much with scientists.
Right. Okay.
A lot of the people with similar personalities to mine actually would be Catholics, not
right. Why is that?
Pentecostals. I think Pentecostalism, especially, can be quite a bit sort of spiritual,
experiential, as opposed
experiential,
to
a little bit
structured,
a little bit airy fairy, a little bit.
Yep. That makes sense. Yeah,
not so logical.
Right.
Not so well structured.
So something that's more structured up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
But I think for me that's. At times it's felt like I'm a little bit on my own, a little bit isolated. But at the same time, it's like, wow, there's this richness of people around me that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
I think that's a beautiful vision.
And I would say that, you know, my church family is so special to me in that regard, because we have people of all ages, of all walks of life.
That diversity is beautiful. I mean, I, for one,
Yeah.
I appreciate, you know, I always enjoy my conversations with you because it is different in some ways to some other conversations. And I grow. I'm the better for learning from different perspectives and different views and different personalities. And I think that's what Paul would say. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Embrace that. That's what he's trying to say to these guys, because they've somehow formed up factions and there are infighting.
Yeah.
Well, division is the word it uses in the New Living Translation here. And he's pretty hard on division. He's saying it's not good.
So I guess as the sort of brings to mind the question for me, that as a pastor, is this something you're worrying about? Is this something you deal with? Is this challenges that you face in your world?
Yeah, it is. And I know that, you know, I know it's my reading of the Apostle Paul, and I don't always find that I get agreement from every other pastor I speak to. Different ones will have different theological reasons for what is important in the church. But for me, because of everything I just said about I believe Paul's vision for the church, I believe the New Testament makes it clear Paul's vision for the church is this radical unity in the face of radical diversity. I am passionate about that for the church. And I get antsy when I see diversity being quashed, when we all want to look the same or think the same or have judgment or pass judgment on the other people or whatever it might be. That does concern me.
Yeah.
And so what do I do with that? Well, I just continually try to just keep projecting what I've just said as a vision, because I think this is the beautiful thing of the church. This is heaven on earth. This is what the church is supposed to be, a little Eden. It's supposed to be a little bit of heaven on earth. And it's only going to be that if we can break down the walls of disunity.
Yeah.
So I know I'm on my soapbox about that, but I just think that's the picture of what the church should be.
Yep.
And that should be attractive to those outside.
Any tricks you've learned, picked up over the years?
Tricks in what regard, and how?
On how to keep people diverse, I guess. Or
okay, sure.
How to keep away from that factioning.
Gotcha.
Factioning thing, because I know for me, you know, it can be very easy just to turn up to church and always talk to the same people.
Sure. Yeah.
And always, you know, I've got my band people,
Yes.
I've got my tech
Your
people,
tech people, so you can stay in the safe
so
zone.
you know, I've sort of found my little cliques there, and it's you know, it's often been a challenge. It's always been something I've thought about, that I would try to talk to other people. It's not natural for me to go and talk to new.
It's not natural
and
for me
different
either.
people.
No, there are little
it's
skills
always
that
been
you
a
can learn.
challenge. Yeah.
And look, and some people will be naturally extroverted, naturally talk to people. I'm not one of those people either. So I've learned to do that over time, or I'm learning to do it. But, you know, left to my own devices, I'll be happy talking to the people who are the same as me too. So I have to, it's my drive for the genuine care of others, of wanting others to feel valuable, that will drive me out of my comfort zone. So I look around the room, I go, who's on their own? You know, I'm talking about in a church Sunday setting, you know, after church, you know, who's standing on their own? Or I look around and go, it's the same people are always speaking to each other. Let me go and let's break up that group and go and grab someone else, you know? I'll do that kind of thing because I want every person to feel valuable. So that's the tip. That's the tip I would have, is be other-centered, like we were saying in Ecclesiastes. If you're others-centered, that should be enough of a drive. You don't have to have it all right. It's okay to perfectly turn up to someone and say, I've never met you before and I've never done this before, but I don't necessarily feel comfortable, but I'd just like to get to know you. Most people are actually really appreciative of that, because if in reality, probably 80% of people identify exactly with that feel. They're just standing there going, I don't know what to do. But if you go, hey, I'd just like to get to know a bit about your story, most people will be okay with it. They'll actually appreciate you going, you're not coming with all the answers. You're coming, I don't know all the answers, but I'd just like to get to know you.
And I feel like it's those moments, particularly when it's someone so different and so, you know, so far out of your comfort zone, that's when you get the most out of it.
Totally, yeah.
That's when you really, that relationship
you become
that you build, even just for a few moments.
Yeah.
It is, you really get something, you get a lot out of that.
That's it. It's more blessed to give than receive, because in that moment, you're actually enlarging your own world. That's the crazy thing about it. You've stepped outside of your comfort zone. You've heard from someone else, and now you might not agree with them, but you understand something more than you are now. This is the thing: is diversity, and this is what Paul's addressing here. Diversity does not mean agreement on everything either. It's okay to go, I don't see the world that way. Jesus, I was telling someone on Sunday, I mean, Jesus had Matthew the tax collector and Simon the zealot in his group. You cannot get two more polar opposite political perspectives than that.
Yeah.
I said to someone in church, I said, the closest thing I could say by explanation is like putting a member of the Greens and Pauline Hanson together in the same team. I mean, that's just trying to think. They're polar opposites in the political spectrum. That's what Jesus did. And yet he found a way to unite people around him. He had a radical vision for unity.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to agree with a person, but you can value them and learn from them and respect their right to their perspective and become a better person, bigger person yourself. So there's some tips on how I do it. Get outside your comfort zone.
In Ecclesiastes, we just looked at that. If an old guy at church came up to me and was saying, "Oh, it's all meaningless. Life is meaningless. I've seen everything," I might not necessarily, normally I wouldn't necessarily think that I really associate with that. I might say I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I disagree with that perspective, but it's like if you sit and listen for a little bit,
There's a story behind it.
you hear the story behind it, and then suddenly this is starting to make sense now.
In fact, anytime anyone is negative about life or God or anything, I always say to people, I say, if someone comes at you and accuses your God or accuses you of cynicism or accuses you of oversimplification or whatever, I said, there's always a story. There's always an experience. So if we can learn not to get, I know we want to get defensive. I know it hurts. I know that, but that leads to factions. But if we can, with God's grace, go, no, this person's more important than my well-being right now. Maybe there's some pain there. Tell me a story. Just a simple question like, I'd love to hear more about that. What's been your experience that's made you feel like what the old man said in Ecclesiastes? What's your experience? Why is that? At the very least, you'll get an insight into something about another person that you wouldn't have got if you just had gone straight into defensive mode.
Absolutely. And, speaking from the other side of that, one of the most powerful things you can do for someone, one of the most powerful acts of love is listening to someone and hearing them and letting them know that they're heard. Yeah. And not judged, but heard.
Yeah.
That's, I know, especially when I was going through a lot of anxiety and depression, a lot of people, they don't know quite how to respond to that. They don't know quite what to say. They don't know how to make you feel better. They want, especially with family, they want you to feel good. They want you to feel happy. They don't quite know how. Yeah. But
what did you need in that moment?
Just to be heard and listened, not judged.
The gift of presence.
And even if it's not like, people, they want to give you the solution. They want to say, oh, what you need is ABC, follow these 3 steps and this will help you. They want to help, but sometimes they can't. But the thing that really helps, is actually just listening and being heard. Yeah. Being heard is, for me, it's one of
it's the core being of our identity for all of us. What you described there is exactly what I would say to people. I'm not naturally good at this. I'm naturally a fix-it person. But I have learned and continue to learn over many years of pastoral care. Back to, any tips. What you're saying there is so spot on, is that you don't need to solve the problem. The best gift you can give the person is the gift of your presence. In fact, it's perfectly okay to say, that sounds really sucky. I don't have any answers, but I'm here if you need anything. That in itself, that gift can be huge. What most people's narrative in my years of pastoral ministry, most people will say, I don't want to stuff it up, so I won't say anything. Someone's lost a loved one. Oh, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to send a card. I don't want to send anything. I'll make it worse. I can tell you from many years of 30 plus years of pastoral ministry, you'll actually more often than not make it worse if you don't say something. I know you're trying to avoid saying something, but it's better to say, I'm really sorry. I'm here. I'm here as much as you need. Sometimes it's just a case of just showing up and doing something kind. It's not just enough to say if there's anything I can do. Maybe sometimes you can just show up with a gift card or an order of Thai and say, hey, have some dinner, and not give them the option, just do something. It just shows kindness. Yeah. I think that's what Paul's trying to break down is this factioned fear. Fear breeds faction. If we are afraid of others, if we separate out those people, we should be afraid of those people. That's what breeds faction.
Yeah.
He's going, no, embrace diversity. Yeah.
That's really good. And I think, interesting, again, to be thinking about Ecclesiastes as we're reading this, because the next few verses are going on talking about wisdom and foolishness.
Yeah.
And the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are headed for destruction. But we who are saved know that it is the very power of God. As the scriptures say, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and discard the intelligence of the intelligent. Verse 24, but to those called by God to salvation, both Jews and Gentiles, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. The foolish plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans. God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength.
You almost could extract those verses out and throw them into Ecclesiastes 12, couldn't you?
Yeah.
It's a pretty good summary.
Yeah. It's like all this wisdom of the world, sure, it's nice, but
It's still going to be, it's foolishness. It's the wisest of human wisdom is more foolish than the foolishness of God is the language he's using.
Yeah.
Even though, there's no foolishness in God, but he's showing the disparity between God's wisdom and human wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea that the gospel of Jesus Christ is, it kind of undermines the wisdom of the world. It's not complicated.
No.
It's not, it's not this big drama, this big philosophical debate. It's not exclusive.
It's not exclusive. It's a simple message.
Yeah.
Christ died for you.
Yeah.
Which Paul will say in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 10, he'll say, Christ died for you. And that's the foolishness of it. It seems ridiculous that it would be that simple.
When I think of a lot of the factions in the church, I've been watching a few YouTube videos lately talking a lot about the history of the church and the way the churches, the denominations have formed and changed over the years, and all of the splits and schisms and all of that. And it does, looking back at a lot of that, it does really feel like there's a few things happening. But one of them does feel like there's this intellectual pride that seems to come in at times. People have these grand ideas of what it all means, and they disagree about those ideas, and then that starts to form these factions.
That forms a faction.
Yeah.
Because I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And there's always a valid question is, well, at what point do we divide?
Yeah.
At what point do we say, well, that's wrong, that's heresy, and that's often the dividing thing. I think church history has probably shown us that we have set that dividing point too stringently most of the time. More often than we've been too inclusive, we've tended to be too exclusive.
Yep.
So I think my view is, there are certain absolutes that we hold to, but for me, they come back to pretty much the Nicene Creed. They come back to the basics, and beyond that, I might not agree, but I don't want to part company with people over that stuff, because I could end up sitting in judgment, presuming that I'm right and they're wrong.
Yep.
And I think it's so subtle, but it's so dangerous. That's what leads to factions, is this sense of I'm right, you're wrong, you're different, you're the problem here, not me. I think we have to get to the point where we go, let's just treat our level of wisdom with a higher degree of humility than that.
Yep. Because God says, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise.
Exactly.
I'm thinking, all of this science and these great things, and, all of the fundamental laws of the universe that we've discovered, and, feeling this sense of pride that we know how it all works. And it's kind of like, yeah.
Well, like you said, I mean, who knows the way AIOs go, who knows in 50 years if they're going to look back and think how antiquated we were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely.
That's the approach life with a degree of humility.
Yeah, it's there's exactly that.
Yeah.
Approach it with humility, and I think that goes a long way to being a united community.
Yeah, exactly. It will help. I'm just reminded of there's a picture on the Church of All Nations in Jerusalem, up on I guess won't be able to see it, but it's up on the which is the church in the Garden of Gethsemane, and it's a beautiful Catholic church. And up on painting on the top of the, what do you call it, at the top? On the fascia up the front at the top anyway, is this image of comparing the wisdom of foolishness. It's got these wise guys sitting here who are making out they know everything, and then there's these other, the apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they're just making out that they know nothing.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to picture it with my glasses on, as sending the message, exactly that message of Paul, that you think you can reach me with all your glory and all your wisdom, human wisdom, and it's just going to come up. It's going to come up completely short of the just accepting the foolishness of the cross.
Yeah.
Looking to Jesus and the foolishness of the cross, and I think that's life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right.
What else you got there in 1 Corinthians?
That's pretty much it. I think
much it for this one.
For our first chapter there.
First chapter. Yep.
My last question would be, like knowing Paul, looking over looking back at this chapter, he's probably laying some groundwork and setting things up for the rest of the book.
Yes. Yeah.
What sort of things can we look forward to in 1 Corinthians?
In the rest of 1 Corinthians. So
over the next few podcasts.
He's going to deal with a lot of this division stuff. So he's going to be talking a lot about unity. He's going to talk about some questions around how do you deal with meat sacrificed to idols.
Okay. Yep.
What does that mean? Should we eat meat sacrificed to idols? How do you deal with pagan worship?
That's always a topic on the top of my mind.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a very practical topic. Well, can I go there? Can I touch that? Can I eat that? Yep. What should I do there? Is that appropriate? All that. He's going to deal with everyday life like that.
And it's a lot of those things might not be practical directly for us. Like when I'm going to McDonald's, I'm not thinking about
whether or not it
was the cow on this in
was
this
it kosher?
hamburger sacrificed to idols or not.
Exactly.
But at the same time, there's still there are a lot of aspects of that we can apply in our
totally.
lives,
Deeply. I mean, 1 Corinthians 8 and I think it's Romans 14 both deal with the whole meat sacrifice. It's one of the most practical things because we all have idols in our world. We all have taboo subjects. We all have certain things we think we should do or shouldn't do. And Paul will say, hey, what you have as your standard is okay for you. Don't impose your standard upon somebody else. That's what he's kind of saying, because he's big about unity, because that's causing division in the church. Some people are worshipping a certain day, and he's saying, no. If you worship a certain day, you honor a certain day for the Lord, do it unto the Lord. But don't be down on the person who doesn't. That kind of thing.
He's really continuing this unity.
It's the unity theme,
idea.
honestly.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say, just jumping through here, I would say most of 1 Corinthians, Paul in one form or another is addressing this issue of things that cause disunity in the church.
Yep.
Paul condemns spiritual pride as chapter 5. Avoiding lawsuits with Christians, chapter 6. How to do a healthy marriage, instructions on marriage, chapter 7. Food sacrifice to idols, I said, chapter 8. Paul says, I'm going to give up my rights. This is how I'll bring unity. He starts to say, chapter 9, the way to do it is I'll give up my rights so that others can feel valued. And he goes on in a section about Israel, and he talks about communion and the communion meal and how to do that in unity. Then he gets into the whole spiritual gifts thing and giving your gifts, 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14, with a love chapter in the middle of it. I mean, Paul's just saying, for goodness sake, just get on with each other. That's his message in 1 Corinthians. For the love of all things holy, just get on with each other. That's pretty much how I'd sum up 1 Corinthians. Pretty much where he goes with it.
Yep. Well, lots to look forward to. I'm really looking forward to hearing those episodes.
Yeah, and thank you for being with us for your first episode.
Thank you. It's been an absolute honour. I've been a big fan of the podcast.
Thanks, mate. That's great.
It's a real honour to be here.
We're going to back up, have a quick break, back up, and we're going to record some Deuteronomy, the end of Deuteronomy and John chapter 1. Yeah, we're going to do Moses' final speech at the end of Deuteronomy. So totally different stuff.
Yes.
All right, well, thanks for being with us today, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you on our next episode.